WTC has ignition. Hello.
Woo! We're live. Let's pair off, shall we? And start going through what we have today.
We have stuff and things. Stuff and things, my friends.
It's going to be a good time.
I'm gonna like my own video.
Oh, that works too. We'll all do that as well. But welcome everyone to episode 2 of the WTC Clinic series, where we'll be breaking down, analyzing, discussing, and bringing the world of competitive Team 40K to your screen. Of course, Brad and Matt here with me, Scary, and we're going to be chatting. And today, the discussion is going to be pretty interesting. We're going to learn how to attack, defend, philosophy. It's going to be a good talk.
I love the first slide because we could never move on from here because it's different for each team and for each different players. Because we're like, Team Comp 3. Well, are you... Pull up a chair because all of us have something to say about that. You know what I mean? And then the attacker, sword versus defender type shield list, those are in every list. However, what you have, what's up, Nergomat? But what you have is a lot of times you have a general team concept also that comes in. So you could have, the standard, these are attacking, these are defending, and these are in the scrum. And when I say the scrum, if you're playing an 8-man team, at the end you have 3 lists that effectively just kind of get thrown together. One gets thrown as a defender, 2 get thrown as attacker, 1 gets thrown out, gets accepted, the other 2 play each other, and then you have a list that's kind of also playing each other. So you can't end up with your weakest lists in that scrum, or you'll take some serious hits. But then there's entire team comp theories, like we're stating in the first here, is we've done, for America, for instance, we have had teams where we tried to put out tons of huge bodies lists, tons of models. So a lot of teams don't have 8 lists that can deal with 150, 200 models. So you kind of get accidental auto, not even just auto wins, but very tough matchups for your opponent because they only have Meltagons and I only brought Grots, so
yeah, it's very weird because you do see some teams might just go, okay, we'll go all mech, or we'll go all horde, or something like that, and you get rounds where you just go, oh, so we brought 2 or 3 lists to deal with that, but the other 5 are really going to struggle. But then you could run into the chance of a team that's gone, oh, we've got 5 lists that can deal with that because we were expecting a lot of horde, and then you're
exactly. Then you get a bunch of bad matchups. I mean, we did it the year that in 2018, whatever, the year that we won, we actually made a bad call, but we ended up putting it on a good player. So we threw Andrew Gagno in front of the bus several times because we thought there was going to be a ton of horde because that's what we were bringing. And almost all of the teams brought double knights and primarchs. And we went, well, all the bolt guns you brought are going to be real bad against these knights. Also, you're playing knights every round. Figure it out. Goodbye.
People brought a whole bunch of horde stuff. It's always interesting when looking at the sword defender shields. It's important to know, just standard, every team or every country at the WTC will have a different philosophy. And that is from a variety of factors, from what is relevant to the meta in terms of what lists you can build with specific factions, because some factions work well within builds in others or within the meta. And then sometimes you have like a faction expert that decides to build like a random list with their faction they know really well that has all the tools to deal with a specific meta faction, and then goes off the wall, and you can kind of use that to kind of like tackle one of these tough meta lists or skew lists without them even really knowing what's going to happen.
See, the thing is, we did this, and this is a 5-man tournament, so it's not as big as the 8-man like WTC. But for BFS, I thought, well, if everybody's bringing the same, basically top 4s, can we tech into that? So there's also that mentality of, if we know that every team's going to have certain lists with certain builds, well, instead of just taking them, could we take anti those build lists? Because you can trap people. You know, they defend with one of their big lists, and as long as you have 2 lists that are good against them, you can trap that list. Because now I put out Skari, and Skari is amazing, but he has a problem with just one type of thing. Well, I have 2 of those types. Even though you can refuse one, now you're in a bad match.
Yeah. So for everybody who's just tuning in, learning about the team-based event, if you didn't catch the first episode, we discussed a little bit about how pairings work and things like that. We will be breaking down a full pairing of teams in later episodes, so you can see how the process works exactly. But in layman's terms, Matt, what would you say is the definition of an attacker or sword list? What is its role within a team?
So for me, in fact, the way I've always looked at this in the past, your attack list is something going, okay, my job is to go out there and get the big wins. I don't need to be able to play everything. I don't need to be able to play nothing. I need to be able to play lists that we expect to go down as defenders, or lists in the mid pairings, late pairings, and just go, okay, that, I will destroy. These couple of lists over here, no, I don't want anything to do with them. If I play them, they're bad. And it might be, so say you go, okay, Eldar are the top build. You might have an Eldar build and go, okay, I'm going to make a build that Eldar just plays everything. It's going to get points. That's not an attacker. That's not a sword. If you make an Eldar build, that's going, I don't want to play against Tau, Nids, Custodes, any of the 5, even if they're Eldar, I will destroy because I've teched and I've took different pieces and things for that. Yeah, go for it.
I think historically speaking, a list like the, 6 Eldar planes or 8 Eldar planes or whatever, that was very much a attacking list, a list that went down and just bullied another list.
The thing is those kind of lists have to get points, and that goes again, and that counters, with the opposite of that, which is your shield list, which Correct. His whole job is not to win, but to make those attackers get 10s or less, maybe even 12s or less. Because maybe you have a beat stick, you have a beat Tau, you've got a Tyranid list, and they're looking to get 20s on a 0 to 20 scale. They're looking to get 18s and 20s and just really smash, and then you put your list out and you lose 8 to 12, and that's 100% a win for a shield list. So they're so different in the makeups. Also, they're so skewed because of the fact that you're not even looking to win, you're looking to not lose badly. And the other list is looking to smash, so it doesn't even have a plan B. It just has a plan crush. And that's
a plan 100% all the time. So in terms of a definition of defender list, Brad, in a single sentence, what would it be?
Say it one more time.
We have to repeat because he's old.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. What would you describe, like very quickly, a defender list is blank?
Defender list, Death Guard, 40 Deathwing Terminators, just anything that can be put out and just sit and take points.
60 rags.
Yes, right, exactly. Yeah. Just a list that's going to score its points no matter kind of what your opponent does, and also doesn't need to go out and extend, doesn't need to engage for its points, doesn't need to go and take kill secondaries and things of that nature. A list that's self-contained that can score a good amount of points and keep that differential small no matter what. WTC, you can have certain soup factions, but you never want to because they take every book can be used once over the entire team. So if you took Dark Eldar and you put Harlequins with it, you now have used the Craft World book and the Dark Eldar book.
Right, which is not something you always want to do. Now, of course, for anybody who doesn't really know how WTC scoring works, right, because it works off of a differential. And so say, for example, Matt and I are playing a game, and he takes an attacker list. And he's designed his list to score anywhere from 90 to 100 points in total for the game. And he can reliably do that pretty much every single game because he's just smashing people. He has to not only do that, he has to prevent me from scoring points. So if I build a defender list, my aim is to try even score a 70 or an 80 without having to do anything and just sitting there and doing absolutely nothing. And there are some armies that do that well. What that does is it lowers the point difference And that's how you determine the score in WTC.
And
that's huge.
And there's such a big thing on that with like, for instance, the way I play usually is I'm a defender or I'm swing, because I typically just score high, but I also am not putting my opponent to lower points. I'm just trying to win my game. So I can play against most anything, but I'm not designed to smash out and do 100 to, get that 100 to 40 and get a 20-point win.
It gets really interesting as well, because if you bring a list from a 20, even just down to a 10, you're not just getting 10 points to your team, even though you've only changed the score by 10. You're actually changing the overall difference by 20, because they're losing 10, but your team's also gaining 10.
Yeah, it's so big.
So in a round where you need 86 points out of 160, and each point is gained by a +5 differential, then that 20 point can be huge. That can be a massive difference overall in the round.
That's why it's so big for, you get that experience, because once you get experience in going to these, you realize that you're not just going to go for wins when you're not going to win that game. You're just going for points or keeping the differential low. So you're not going to make, like, again, if this weekend I'm in a tournament and it's a singles event and I'm losing the game, I'm going to go for it, make sure that I at least try for the win. Well, in WTC, I'm not going to do any of that. I'm going to make the losses small as possible and take as many points as I can for the team. And it's a completely different play style, because if you go for it, you start taking risky moves, which then compound because you're already playing from behind. You can just basically put that car, not only are you not putting the gas down, you're putting the car in reverse and getting out of there.
100%. So not only do you have to be able to score points, you have to understand, and this is where knowledge of the meta and knowledge of what your list is capable or not of doing is highly important when developing either an attacker or defender list, because it's completely fine to build a list that has bad matchups, that you don't want to run into stuff like Matt was saying. But it's very important to learn how to identify the things that will make you not win, right? Or will make you not score points, and communicate this with your captain or your coach or your team so that they understand what parameters you're working within.
Yeah, so when we're saying all that there, that's more for like 8 players in a team. So when you've got 8 in a team, you can easily have these where I can't play this, I can't play that. If you're going down to 5 players in a team, you've got less flexibility of not being able to play stuff, because you only have 1 round of pairings, 2 round of pairings, choosing matchups to avoid those things. So
there's also so many less traps too. You have so little option to trap. And on a 5, everybody kind of knows what's going to be put out. You're going here, then you're doing this. And in 8-man, if you don't realize that you have 2 bad matchups still in the mix, you're in for a bad final scrum there.
And the final scrum, right? That's something that comes later in the pairings. It's basically the 2 rejected players that got rejected from the last sort of matchup have to play themselves. And a lot of the times it can be a gamble. Which one are they going to reject? Which one are they going to take? That kind of determines which one you want to take, which one you're going to reject to try and get a pairing that you want at the end. And sometimes that's sort of like it's like a flip of the coin, kind of roll of the dice to see what pairing it is. But that brings us to our third type of list, which in some places called a flex list or a tactical list.
Oops,
I think called it.
I'll scroll back. I'll scroll back to swing. I was already in the future on the next slide.
We haven't even finished talking about types of lists, Brad. What?
I got excited. I know.
But a flex list or a what do you call it again?
Swing. A swing list.
A swing list is one that does exactly what Brad is describing. It can attack and get points. It can defend and get points. And is sort of like a what we would consider an all-rounder list that you can kind of throw into the mix and is robust enough to take on some bad matchups sometimes or take advantage of some good matchups, basically.
It doesn't have great matchups. It doesn't have bad matchups. It's like, okay, I can play things, but some I'm going to lose a little bit, some I'm going to win a little bit. And it's just getting that right. Okay, we need to lose a little bit against that. Just stop it winning big. Go for it. Just having that little bit of, an option for it. It can go here, it can go there. Gives you a little bit of flexibility.
You can have the problem of the US had it for years past, is we brought too many swing lists, because a swing list would basically be a singles list. What you would try to play in a tournament that you're going to go to for singles. And I think a lot of teams do this when they first start out, especially when you got new players. Everybody brings a singles type list, and then you end up with no ability to really extend out, besides just hopefully having a better player against another player that maybe be less experienced, because your lists aren't designed for maximum differential and or to defend and just not take it. If you take a bunch of singles lists, what happens is you probably can't maximize in the pairings, you can't maximize on the board, and even though you might feel that you have the better team, the other team can actually set you up for pitfalls.
Yeah. And I think it's important to remember how many, like, it's the amount of flex lists, or variable lists, the amount of attackers, the amount of shields, that's going to vary from team to team. But when you do I think, what is it, 120,000 different combinations when it's 8 versus 8 or something like that. There's a lot of combinations that you can make out of it. Like, it's mathematically kind of crazy how many combinations you can do with 2 teams of 8 people each. And so trying to mitigate what you play into can be greatly important, including being the guy that takes the bus for the round, right?
Now I'm going to the next slide, because it is okay to have bad matchups as long as you have some good ones. But as a team, it's more important to know, if you're the pairings guy, you're the captain, you're whatever. If you get on a team, you have to be honest about what your actual bad matchups are, because the team is actually looking to avoid bad matchups as much as they're trying, way more than they're trying to get good matchups.
Yeah. Nobody cares if you turn around and say, no, I don't want to play that. Don't put me against that. That is not what I want to play. In a singles, people are like, oh, stop moaning. No one's going to say that in a team, because you're all there back. You're accepting, okay, if you don't want to play that, you're not even sure what it does. So you're okay, you don't know what it does. Let's not find out at the event.
In turn 3.
Fair enough. You just have to say that. You say, I'm not sure. Either talk me through it now, and I'm still not confident. Okay, just someone else take it, because you just got to do what you got to do for the team, and nobody will, in a good team, fault you for it, because if you don't say it, you let the team down in other ways.
As the guy that's been doing the pairings for forever, as cooped up, I can't stand when somebody gives false information. You don't need bravado. Everybody knows you're good. You have all the alpha
You're
guys.
at the World Team Championships.
Right.
You know how to play the game.
Exactly. Just accept the fact that sometimes that's just a bad matchup for you. You know what I mean? We'll just don't do it. Yeah. Especially, and it changes a lot. And I feel that people don't do enough of their homework before they go, a lot of times, for every team, because you see a lot of people have scores, and you look at everybody's matrices, because every team does it. They do either what they think they're going to score, a yellow, red, green kind of system, but it changes per the mission and the deployment. There's a lot of missions where, I'm great if I'm on Hammer and Anvil, I'm one of the board quarters and stuff like that, but then you go, oh, well, if it's Dawn of War, that's significantly different.
Yeah, that's different. Yeah. Or if you go, sometimes, going first or second might have, we call them coin flip matchups, where you're if I might be an attacker that's going into a specific matchup, like I'm a sword, and if I go first, I'll do great. If I go second, instead of getting a 20, I'm only going to be able to get a 10, because they're going to get the last turn to grab all the little objectives or whatever. And it's very important to have that sort of idea as well, because some defenders can do the same. They're like, I should lose this, but if I go second, I might win 12-8 and get a few points or something like that, because I'll have that end game grab objectives capability or whatever it is.
So I see a lot more of that is when you get 2 sword lists up against each other. So when you've got 2 lists that just want to go and do that crippling blow, do that super high damage aggro, you both smashing into each other and going a spike on dice rolls, or a little misplay off turn 1. these two lists, they're not designed to sit and just play the game. They're designed to just go at each other.
Mash. Old AdMac, Crusher Stampede, basically any Tau right now,
Yeah,
any,
the old our Flyers.
exactly. That was whoever
okay.
went first auto won. It was just laughable.
Yep.
But you could end up with a pairing because something that you're like, okay, you know what? The other pairings, we've messed up in the front half. Let's gamble on this pairing and see how it goes. And kind of the reverse of that, you might just go, this list, it's not doing very well. It doesn't have the matchup we wanted. Like Brad was saying before, they took, I think it was old Custo bikes with Hurricane bolters, aggressors with bolters. It was just a million bolter shots. And you're like, okay, you're not going to get, we'll try and get you that one horde list. You've not got it. Okay. Do we try and protect it? Do we try and?
I know how that feels.
Welcome to Knights.
I had 14 Venoms. I built a list to play into the Plague Marine spam. Right, that was literally like one of the builds was just 160 Plague Bearers or something silly, and I built a list that was designed for that. And I think I played that list once in like 6 rounds, and so ultimately it turned into me trying to just like either do a flip coin or run into matchups that I wasn't really suited for because we had gotten out paired and I wasn't able to play the list that I was like designed to try and beat.
Yeah, or you just take one for the team. You go, okay, I can't get the matchup I want. My other matchups are average, but nobody wants to play that. So if I've got no good, screw it. I'll play that. I'll just take it.
You have to do that though because it makes you win though, and you have to be. That's why I love teams so much because of the fact that one loss is no big deal. Whatever. If you got as many points, like ATC, still ATC champion because they haven't had one since, but ATC. Austin's doing the pairings and we're sitting there and he goes, all right, here's the deal. I just kept going on as first defender and they gave you this, which you're totally going to crush and get a ton of points against, but nobody wants to play this and you're probably going to lose against it. Have fun. Just handed it over. He goes,
and that's what we call the bus. That is literally why we call it the bus. You grab your teammate and you toss them in front of the bus and the bus just runs over them. But it's for the good of the rest of the team because then the bus misses everyone else.
But once you play it, that's why it's a big deal. It's like I'm so jealous of you in the Europe right now because you guys have so many more team tournaments because it takes playing in a couple team tournaments to get that mentality though.
Yeah.
Because if you only go to singles and all of a sudden you get smashed a couple times, you're like, what? I should play a different game.
Yeah. It definitely needs a good team around you and a good set of people to pick you back up and push you back in front of it.
Yeah,
exactly. And sometimes the person who gets run over by the bus ends up holding onto the bottom of the bus, prying the doors open, crawling their way to the driver's seat, and drives that bus. And it's the best feeling in the world when your teammate that got bust comes out and is like, I got points. I got some points. And you're like, that's right. Good job. Good job. We did that with was it a double Land Raider Custodes build, right? So this is before this is old Custodes.
This is back in time. You're like
this is back in Inari times, okay? Like back with double shooting. And we would put him down first every time, and so many times he'd soak up the 9 Hive Tyrants or the Inari build, like just something that was just bad for everyone, and he took it like a champ. Even took 3 Shadow Swords against his Land Raiders. Anyway,
it can be really blunting and really draining going into a game, especially if this happens, like say 3 times in an event. The first time, like okay, yeah, right, yeah, I've got to take it for the team. The next time, okay, but then the third time, you still got to be on it, because
exactly
there's a chance you come back with 3 points rather than 0, and that can win the round.
100%.
So it is a big mental drain to do that role.
I told you the first time we talked about this, I said the game that I got 1 point was what we actually won by when I scored my 1-19. But the thing is that you have to talk. You have to have a good team around you, though. Like when everybody says they're good for everything, when you first start, but it is mentally draining to go, I might lose a lot of games this weekend, especially if your team's winning because of it, because then you're still at the top. You're still playing. You're only going to be playing good people. It's not like everybody just went and pulled a random guy off the street. They took the best people from their country that they could bring, and they're all playing you now. And they're always having an advantage against you because they put whatever they think that can beat you is what you're playing every single round.
I think the internet and the coverage of these kind of events make it a lot harder as well for that kind of role, because say for like yourself, Brad, you're saying you like to go down as a defender. If you walk away from every game at a weekend with 5 points, everyone back home in the States is looking, going,
Yeah,
Brad only got 5 points. He only got 5. What's he doing? Why is he not winning these games? Whereas, in fact, that could be a win. But it's really hard with the coverage to kind of see that aspect unless you've got that understanding and you look into the details of it.
Well, there's such a culture with like singles events versus doubles events. Like at a singles event, it doesn't matter if you win by 1 or 2 points. Like we saw that this weekend during the Dallas Open, for example.
Yeah.
Where like there's like games that are won or lost by 2 points, 3 points. Like this weekend, I lost a game by 2 points. And it was like it was close. It was so tight till the very end. Lost dice roll, I lose by 2 points. Right? That's how that works. But like in a team event, that's a 10-10, as we discussed the first time. And that means that I took a big attacker list and I stopped them from scoring a 20. And it's like, yes, good job, me. But then when we're like, you're trying to like have like personal rankings or whatever in the ITC, a team event doesn't really encapsulate the skill level or the skill set that goes into being consistent more often than not, which I think is a huge part of is that consistency and knowledge of what's going to happen on the game that's more important sometimes than what physically happens in the game.
It's a big mental thing on that, and you have to be prepared, and it's really hard. I wish we had more teams. And I've said this before, and I'm very serious. I think people think I'm joking. I just wouldn't play singles events if we had a really good team circuit. But we do have to, especially in the Americas. So America and Canada and stuff, we're very, very single focused on the coverage, and it is tough. You know what I mean? Especially if you're going to go out the defender, you're probably not going to win all your games, and you're also a lot of times only looking for small points in the first place to take that out. So you're trying to score points, but you have a game strategy that is designed around getting a 10. You know what I mean? Yeah. Maybe nothing else, and that's how you're playing the whole game. So you're never going to get huge points. You're just going to get the points that you can, because you're not going to take those risks, because there's no reason to, because you're designed your list for that. And also, if you don't stay within what you're supposed to do and you try for that big score and it doesn't work out, you're letting the team down now. Because if you just stayed there and got your 5 to 8 points, the team probably wins at that point in time. If you go for it because you thought you were going to get your 20 and it doesn't work out, well, now, you just let everybody down on that. So
I think it's also important to have your coach in there as well. So your coach will come around and go, oh, this bad matchup, it's actually going okay. So everyone else, don't take those risks. Just make sure you get your points. And those good matchups aren't going great because someone just went, oops, didn't work. You need that person, the coach, whoever, to come around and tell everyone else, go, yeah, I know this is a horrible matchup, but we need you to get 5 points. And people panic, and everyone's
it's so funny because people don't. I think that the coach in especially WTC events is one of the most underrated people out there, because
one of the most important. I cannot stress it enough.
He's making sure what's happening at each one. He's basically in charge of getting a judge if you need a judge, everything else with that. He's keeping track of all the scores and can tell each person also whether you need to change your game or not. And that's a big deal, because if you're kind of resting on your laurels, you're like, okay, Matt's a defender and he's just comfortably, hey, maybe he's ahead. He's getting an 11 instead of that 5. And then you find out the team's losing. All of a sudden he has to go, well, you need to turn that frown upside down and head that way, because we need 5 more points.
So I'm not sure if you'll remember, Scary, because I'm not sure how far back you've been doing the WTC, but do you remember the time before we had coaches? And that role has evolved so much.
The first time I went was 2008 2018, and I was like, so there was we had a coach when we
Yeah.
went.
So it used to be you didn't, and you just be like, cool, I've got my score. Oh, I wish I'd known that. I could have done this. Like,
Exactly.
that role has evolved so much of it, and it's crazy. The first year we brought a coach along, and we're like, oh, wow, that's how useful was that guy? Okay, next year do this, this, and this, and kind of grew into the role, did different things. You can't talk or like out the way and have private conversation, whatever. So our coaches come up and be like, here's a sheet of paper, and I'll show everybody at the table with the number 0 to 20 on it. And we'll ask my player to point at a number, and then I'd secretly point at a number, because it all has to be open, it all has to be fair. You don't get any advantage. But the coach needs to know the information.
And the thing is you have to have a coach that's discreet about what he wants, but also can give you the most information with the smallest amount of time. Because what you can't do, you don't want to go, we need this, and then you're pointing at stuff and going, well, if my opponent doesn't realize that I can take this objective in the last turn, he goes, I think I'm going to get that one now.
I'll just move here. Yep.
Yeah, we found that like at the Canhammer team tournament that happened a couple of weeks ago, all of the teams at the top, like the top teams, had a coach. Like out of 20, almost 30 teams, the teams that did the best tended to have somebody with them coaching them that was helping them out, including our team. And our coach was fantastic. That role of a coach is, we could do a whole episode on just like the like administrative stuff and part of like what a coach's job is, right, at the WTC. But huge. They like at face value, in terms of the conversation we're having right now about attacker, defender, flex lists, the coach in and of himself is like a whole role, is like an army in and to himself. He has to know what the capabilities of that attacker list is, go in, potentially just at a glance, see like a table state, find out like how many points they're going to get potentially, and then go, okay, based on the table state, I like mentally, thought of on our defender list over there, he has gas left in the tank, and go, hey, we need this, 4 points or whatever, and then the person who's in that defensive role has to have the mental sort of strength to go, okay, it's time to push, or do something like that. And so the role that you take, attacker, defender, flex, is also in an ebb and flow that changes based on what other tables are happening, what's happening on other tables as you're playing your game. And it's such a like an organic way of trying to get as many points to reach that winning threshold, right? Which is in WETC, it's 86 points.
Dude, both Dan and Demetrius had such great comments, because team events sound so tactically, non-STR armies can have a massive part to play. And pairings is another full game. It is, and it's so huge because a lot of times the pairings are a game in and of itself, whether you won or lost that. But also then you get into table choices, because when we pair, you go back and forth picking the table, and defender chooses the table. And that's a big thing that a lot of players don't realize is, I'm playing this list, and Scary goes, I smash Brad's list. And then I go, okay, well, I'm going to play on
this table,
yeah, exactly. And I'm going to play on Planet Bowling Ball now. How do you do here? And you're like, I've made bad decisions were made. And the narrator comes in, everything was not okay.
Be like, I'm playing Tau with a bunch of SMS or whatever. This is before like, the Outline Sight shooting got, and there's like one table that has like 8 forests on it. Like, I'm going to pick the forest table, to make the Tau cry.
It's such a big deal. But then in non-STR armies, I mean, a lot of the defender lists aren't what you would consider the top lists. They're just the lists that are very, very durable and can always score their points. I've played so many lists at the ETC/WTC that are just lists that all I wanted to do was get points no matter what. So like, just throw me into stuff and I'll figure it out. Won a lot of those games, but a ton of those times I was just looking for getting as many points against whatever that top tier army was. Remember when we had Scent Star and stuff like that? You're like, every time I went out, I went, so I'm playing this again. Everybody knows you're playing this, Brad. Just accept it and move on. You're like, all right.
We are throwing you under the bus. But you're right. It does mean that armies that are not top meta, tend to have a place within a team-based environment
Huge
because
place.
they tend to have one build or two builds that can be used as an attacker, a defender, or sort of like a variable flex list, as long as they avoid certain things. And that's the beautiful thing of the team environment. What we've been saying is I could build a list that I just don't want to play Tau. I don't want to play the one list that just beats me every time, but the list itself might be quite good.
Let's go into the next the next slide. I can't talk at least.
I've just got one interesting point just to finish off on that. So it's a lot harder to do it now because the internet is everywhere, but it used to be wild in the past where you turn up to an event and you've been sat up in Canada, you've worked on this list, it's not what anyone else in the world is using, it's your own little tweak, it's your thing, and you get to the event and go, ha, and everyone goes, oh, it's whatever, I can play that. And you've changed so many little bits and pieces in the list. It's your own thing.
And you snuck it in.
The Russians last year at the last event, we had a Grey Knights, Dark Angels, and Space Wolf build. And you look at it and go, eh? And then you break down, you look at the combos, and you build, and you go, oh no, keep that away from me. But there's a power to be had in lists that people don't recognize because their matrix will be wrong, their parents will be wrong. It's great.
Yeah, I love this. It goes right into that because you did a good job again, Matt. Props to you. Skew lists, how many to take, and understanding the meta. I feel that this is crazy important and also very contentious for every team.
Yes, we will all have a different opinion on this, and that is okay.
You know your meta, and everyone uses the same meta in the US and the States.
And I love this comment. And I love this comment on that. Internet is everywhere, but the German and Polish still have their own meta. So true. They're always playing a different game than everybody else is, and they're doing well with it apparently. So.
Yeah. Well, for the longest time, I remember being an outsider, like only recently diving into the world of ETC and WTC. In 2018 when I really started playing the game competitively. It was always like Europe has its own meta, right? And it hadn't really sort of like caught on in the terms of like people like the coverage that we have nowadays of like events and lists and breakdowns and statistics and all this stuff. But you'd hear about these wild lists, and 160 players or whatever, and people must be crazy to play that. However, it makes sense once you understand the attacker defender mechanic, the sword shield, the flex. Like you want to have lists that do skew sometimes into that. Like if I take all tanks, then you don't have any non-anti-tank weapon you have is useless. If I take all infantry, then every anti-tank weapon you take is useless. That's sort of like thought process.
Well, I love this because of the fact this is one of my favorite slide because this is such a big thing because there's up to we have 40. I think we're going next time, but the skew list is a big thing because you're going to have to take care of giant hordes, but you're also going to have to take care of knights and big things kind of lists, but you don't know how many teams are going to bring those, so you don't know how many answers you need to those. So it's such a, do we need to take half the team that's able to take on a ton of T8, and if you skew too hard into that and all of a sudden everybody brings huge horde armies and you don't have enough guns and attacks to deal with that, that's a big decision when you're creating this.
Yeah.
So myself and Richard just did the Meta Monday, and we were saying if you're going into an event, you're focusing on the players at the top, the list at the top, and you might go, okay, there's one or two skew lists in the meta. I'm not going to worry about them. If I come up against them, I'll outplay them. But that's a singles mindset. As soon as you take that mindset in teams, you're in trouble. The skew list will mess with your pairings. They'll mess with your results. And if say a team brings 2 mech lists, 2 horde lists, 2 knight lists, all of a sudden you're like, okay, we can play one of them. But if we put a defender down that can't deal with one of those things, they just go, boom, here's 2. And the other will scrap some points. Next one.
Cool. Another big reason you want to have some skew lists is you want to have 1 or 2 lists that are like almost specifically designed to absolutely murder specific lists that you see in the meta, so that when they do say put them down as a defender, you can very easily go, here's the list that will absolutely murder you, plus the list we want you to play, because it's going to help us, with the rest of the pairings. And then they can either take the pairing that's going to destroy them or take the one that we want to help us with the pairings. And so skew lists are useful, to have in your back pocket just for that sort of situation as well.
Yeah. So we are going to cover the pairings in a lot more detail in the next episode, which will be next Monday. We're going to run through an example pairing, example matrix of just different style. So for everyone who's struggling to follow along, going, but how do you pair this into that? We will go through that in 100% detail.
It's still confusing sometimes.
And the slide will literally look like Charlie from Always Sunny, because there will be lines connecting everywhere. But this is good against this, but only this. But yeah, exactly.
Yeah, but it's super important that you understand the concept of lists before they go into the pairings, because if you don't understand why the skew is there or what we're trying to do with pairings, which is kind of what we want to cover here, the different roles and what people are doing, it'll make a lot more sense when we go, this wants to play this. This is how we make it.
What is the most terrifying list out there? The list that people think is bad and you don't understand why they took it. I'm terrified of that list.
Do you remember that one list 2 years ago that had like the one random Grey Knight? Like it was like, there was so many lists that just had a single auxiliary detachment with like a minimum one Grey Knight guy. That was like the Sergeant Grey Knight, and he was there to like get engage points and like do little things, but like he was just random, and it was just like. Anyway,
it's funny. We had a question of the Grey Knights on there. I think Grey Knights are going to be terrifying into this meta, or into a team meta, just because they can take on so many things.
They score the points well without interacting.
They can just hide. So you take 60 bodies, and just go, well, I've got the best secondary in the game, and I'm just going to score points, and you got to figure it out. Also, armor contempts this thing, so.
Yeah, like someone just said in the comments, like teams are great to bring armies you never see in a singles event. If you want to just skew that Grey Knight build, which I think Sky was about to say, with just go, here's a load of paladins.
That's what I was going to say.
Yeah, that's honestly, it may not be winning the singles events, but yeah.
Yeah, you deal with armor contempt and armored resilience or whatever.
Good luck getting a 20-0 against that. You might win, but it's going to score, man.
Exactly. Well, it's funny because at the end of the day, every team will have a certain number of players, and then it's up to the team's sort of like internal organization to develop lists that are going to either attack to try get points, defend to try stop points, either skew to kind of push the mechanized or the infantry or the character heavy or the psychic heavy or the like you can kind of do little mini skews in there, or to get points. At 5, it's probably a little easier because you can kind of pick off like what the top lists are in the meta and go, okay, let's put one of each list and maybe like a faction expert with something random. But at 8, right, you have the top lists, and then you have like 5 other lists or 4 other lists that could be whatever you need, right? Which I think is really, really, really cool.
8's really where you get the shenanigans, because right now you can always kind of get who's the top 3 or 4 easy. So in 4 and 5 man tournaments, you kind of know exactly what you're going to get. It's when you get into the WTC, the 8-man tournaments, where you really go, I don't know what people are going to bring for those last couple lists, and those could be so different. If you're planning, where everybody's going to bring all of the plague bears and all of the hordes, and they bring triple knights, and you're like, oh no. Or the other way around, when you're like, we brought only melted guns, and you're like, I have 300 models. You're like
300 grots or conscripts. You're like, what?
It actually, I think, makes the top, say you've got the top 3 books, I think an 8-man team event powers them down a lot. Because everyone's going, okay, every team will have these 3 books, and they have a build, 2 builds that are dominant, so that you expect to see. So you've got 6 months to prep and go, okay, how do we just not beat, but just new to those? And then the other lists come out and go, ooh, we've not planned as much for those.
Well, it's such a big deal too with the top list though, because especially with all the nerfs to indirect, I really agree that I think we're going to see a lot of draws this summer, because with the nerfs to indirect, if you have the OP list, Tau comes at you and you're like, okay, well, I'll just sit here and never do anything. You know, you still have to see me to do damage. I'll just not die. You know, I'll die at some point in time, but I won't die right away. And instead of getting that 20, you won, but maybe get a 14. Again, 6 points, it's a 12-point swing. You know, if they were counting on this to be a terrible matchup for, you know, Tau versus whatever, you know, every time it's such a big deal in playstyle, because again, in singles that would never happen. The Tau would blow you off the board because you knew that you had to win, so you came out and you took your stranglehold and you got into the middle of the board, you exposed yourself. In a team event, you just go, okay, cool, that was my turn, go ahead and let me tell you what's going to happen on my second turn. Go ahead. So
yeah, and that happens now. We will be doing I'm assuming the last slide is next.
It is the where to get more information.
There you go. Now, we have a WTC thread in the Art of War Discord where folks have already been asking questions about where to find information on their teams, Team Canada, Team USA, and keep up to date with their posts and things like that on social media, which is awesome. We will be checking this thread often, so make sure you post on it, ask us. You can tag any of us if you have any specific questions to do with the WTC, or if there's anything that you might like to see in the clinic itself as well. But Brad, where can they find more information on the WTC?
WorldTeamChampionships.com. And check it out. They have a ton of great stuff. And especially come in to see us next week, because this is the next week when you can disagree, because we'll disagree with each other. You'll see all of us, because we're going to do the pairing, and then we'll disagree about what each army can do to each and where they should be. There's so much play, again, because there's so many permutations that can happen. That's why it's so, again, it's its own game. You literally play a game of pairings before you actually play the games.
Mm-hmm.
So,
and that's where a lot of the little team rituals happen too, which we'll get to in a second. Like, you know, and it's really fun. I think with pairings is one of the funnest parts of the whole event as well.
Yeah, it's something I love and I always get involved with. I was just going to add, I believe next week's clinic on all the pairings is going to be a War Room exclusive potentially. So if anyone's really wants to get interested in that, make sure you join up to the War Room. Not all of the series will be on YouTube for everyone. Some episodes will, some episodes will just be in the War Room. So make sure you get signed up to that if you want all the details. And there's so much more going on in there. There's a packed schedule every week. So I've just been talking for 2 hours straight almost now. I've been in the War Room and now this. And Brad was shouting at me because that's why I was slightly late. Apologies. Yeah, there's so much going on.
It's all Secret Souls, right?
It's all
No, I
Seeks.
blame Nick.
You blame Nick? We blame Nick.
You blame Nick.
We can always blame Nick.
He's in the house. Yeah.
You do blame Nick. There you go.
Why not?
Now, at the same time, the Art of War team is going to be doing a cool sort of like cocktail hour at the WTC. We're still organizing the plans for that, but it's going to include us hanging out and having drinks and a whole variety of just like meet, greet, and as well as some. So we're going to do some clinics and stuff there too.
Rocking it out.
Yeah, I think there's a couple of seminars and just really great social, which
nice.
I think most of the guys on the team will be there because there's, I think, was it 4 or 5, Brad?
There's 5. Now it's 5 Art of War people that are on the team.
I love it. And then 2 of us in Canada are part of the Art of War team as well, so we'll be there too.
Yeah, and then you've got the Aussie guys as well. You've
Yep.
got Matt, Adam may or may not be there. I'm not sure on his plans, but he's been involved in the past with them. And then just me in the UK, all by myself. We'll
take them over. We'll draw them all in. So for everybody watching, we appreciate you, and we'll see you next time.
Bye.
See you guys.